The recording, and we may start the meeting.
You want to begin with the anthem, right?
Okay, that will be right now.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Okay, Ernie.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Today, today we have a very special guest. We've had it before, but before we do that, the sponsors of this organization are important. I'd like Bill to introduce who supports this organization and thank them.
Well, good morning, everyone. We'd like to recognize our major premium sponsors, Louis Joe's, Avalon, Aviles, Gershaw Recycling, Clavanta Energy, and National Grid. These prestigious organizations are committed to the community they serve in many ways, and we appreciate that they are committed to our mission at LIMBA. Thank you all.
Andrea, you wanted to. I want you to introduce the organization that is sponsoring this program, which is St. Joe's. Andrea, are you with us here?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much, Mr. Fazio. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I'm Andrea Volk. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admissions and Admissions Operations at St. Joseph's College, and I am very pleased to welcome you all here today. When St. Joseph's College was founded in 1916 by the Sisters of St. Joseph in Brooklyn, a mission was established that has had a lasting impact on the SJC community. With a commitment to a strong academic and value-oriented education, one that is rooted in the liberal arts and provides for career preparation, our core values of integrity, intellectual and spiritual values, social responsibility, and service inspire our students, faculty, and staff to live a life that is worthy of our motto, esse non vedere, to be and not to seem. With the opening of our Brooklyn campus, the Sisters of St. Joseph established the college obligation to fulfill the educational and cultural needs of the community. That has continued over the past 100 plus years as the college enters the 21st century. In the 1970s, the college welcomed women and men and expanded by opening a campus on Long Island in Patchogue. Our programs are designed for traditional students and professionals alike, with academic support to ensure success. Our accelerated programs and weekend college offerings answer the needs of working adults who balance undergraduate and graduate school with the responsibilities of family and work. Through our Office of Military and Veteran Services, SJC offers innovative programs with individualized attention and veteran-centric resources that assist with positive job search experiences. And now the college is committed to meeting the needs of students of the digital age through the SJC Online Campus, by providing students with solid preparation for personal and professional aspirations while maintaining a strict standard of excellence. Now, as for many, this past year was unprecedented in the world of higher education. We were faced with challenges that proved to be interesting, to say the least, but I am so very pleased to share with you the following highlights. We welcomed a robust class of determined entering freshmen in 2020 with a fall to spring retention rate of 95%. We maintained one of the highest graduation rates of any Long Island college or university again. Our graduate and SJC online programs are enjoying robust enrollments. We provide students with a choice of modalities for course instruction to fit the comfort level and needs of each student. And in accordance with that, we upgraded the technology and strengthened the Wi-Fi throughout campus and expanded the classroom connections between our Long Island and Brooklyn campuses. We implemented sweeping measures in accordance to CDC protocols to protect the health of those coming to campus while maintaining the friendly, personal atmosphere so affectionately cherished at SJC. And we secured building plans for an attractive, multifunctional new student center. Everyone, we are in the year of Saint Joseph. Joseph was a worker for the people, and his values and ideals pave and define the path of our institution. We at St. Joseph's College strive to uphold our mission to support and serve students with the best educational opportunities. Through the college's commitment to affordability, service projects to maintain the lives of others, a dedication to robust student life activities, and the integration of internship and student abroad opportunities alongside exemplary academics, SJC graduates are poised to be successful in their lives. Just as the Sisters of St. Joseph were problem solvers oriented towards excellence, our students and alumni become individuals who also live out the mission to serve, connect, and collaborate with others. We are fortunate to be doing this today as we work with you, our local leaders in business. And now in just a few moments, you will hear from our revered president, Dr. Donald Boomgarten. But first, I'd like to pass the torch back to Mr. Fazio. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Andrea. And you mentioned that the college was started by sisters of the Catholic Church in 1916.
Correct.
Looks like women have been changing this country for a long time. It's about time we got some recognition.
Absolutely, yes. 1916, long time ago, very steadfast path.
Well, I'm all for women taking over more and more of the responsibilities. I'd like to go fishing.
Sounds good, sounds good.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is a man who has been with us before in the past. He has served as the provost of the University of Scranton in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the College of Music and Fine Arts in Loyola University. His career included positions in Eastman School of Music, Ithaca College, and he is, by the way, a very talented musician. I've heard him in concert and using classical material, and I look forward to doing that again if he ever does it where I get invited. And I'm very, very happy to have him back. Dr. Boomgarten, thank you so much for attending today, and we'd love to hear from you. Please welcome.
Thank you, Ernie. And that's high praise coming from you, because I know you're a very good musician, and I appreciate that you came to one of my events. It was actually last year around this time I played a performance here on the Long Island campus of the piano works of Franz Liszt, and I was going to do the same concert in Brooklyn, but unfortunately the pandemic intervened. And so I'm looking forward to playing that concert in Brooklyn, maybe in the fall. We'll see how things shake out. But it's hard to believe that a year has gone by since that performance. I want to thank all of you for inviting me today to speak with you. I see a lot of familiar faces here, and it means a lot to me that I have a chance to communicate with you. Also, that was Andrea's debut as the director of admissions. You know, she took over just not too long ago, and she's doing a terrific job, as you could hear from her
Absolutely.
report. She's really an outstanding member of the staff. And in fact, that's one of the things that's been our saving grace throughout this year, is that we really have a tremendous staff to support the institution. I was thinking today about the title of my talk, which is the challenges to higher education right now. And my week actually started with a virtual meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Consortium of Independent Colleges and Universities just last Monday. And in that meeting, it was announced that the president of St. Bonaventure University had died of COVID, Dennis DePera, who I actually knew. He had been a longtime member of the staff at Lemoyne University. And so it was an example of how serious the times are for higher education. And in that meeting, we discussed, of course, the current state of education, and all of the member independent colleges and universities were weighing in on that. I think that there's no doubt that this year has been transformational in good and bad ways. So I'd like to touch on basically 4 areas: safety, learning, finance, and how we plan on moving forward from all of this. And then I'll leave plenty of time for questions and comments. When the pandemic first appeared for us, it involved a case of a family in Brooklyn at our Dillon Center, which is a pre-K center that we have, a kind of special lab school that's existed since the 1920s. And it's a very sophisticated operation. But one of the teachers came to me and said that there was a case of this new virus, and what should we do? And this was on a Monday, I think maybe March 7th or 8th. And I realized the minute I heard that we were going to have to take some serious steps. And this was really before almost any other college had done this. And because we have campuses in Brooklyn and Long Island, I knew that if I closed one campus, I would have to close both. And so I thought about this for a few hours, but I decided that it would be better to be safe than sorry. We didn't really know at the time how long the virus would be dangerous, but we decided to close both campuses to begin spring break, which was scheduled to begin the next week anyway, and then see how that shook out, and then probably come back after spring break. That was our initial plan. Very quickly, it became clear that we were not going to be able to come back after spring break. We were going to have to shift to new modality, the modality of remote learning. Fortunately for St. Joseph's, we already had 27 fully online programs. So we had a large staff and quite a bit of experience with teaching remotely and online. And that segment of our staff really stepped up and helped the faculty to shift their courses into this new modality. We also implemented protocols on the campus so that if students were on campus, our faculty or staff, they were safe. And because of that, we had virtually no outbreaks of the virus among our students or faculty or staff. At that same time, I said we need to start planning for the summer and for the fall because there's no guarantees we're going to be able to come back anytime soon. How will we approach that? And so for the summer, we remained fully remote, but our plan for the fall that we implemented was about 70% remote and 30% on ground. The on ground courses were primarily laboratory courses, and we also chose to mount a number of the first year courses that the freshmen take to orient them to the campuses. So that was a way to keep them connected to the college. I also was scheduled to teach in the fall, so I taught my course on North American roots music remotely to my course, to my students in Brooklyn. So that was the first time I've ever taught completely online, and that was something I did not only because I enjoy teaching, but also I wanted to see what the faculty was experiencing, what the students were experiencing. So it was a powerful experience for me to do that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So the safety aspect also involved the creation of a COVID response team that consisted of our vice presidents of student life, vice president of marketing, and many other talented individuals who gave us advice, helped us to deal with the crisis as it moved forward, kept us in touch with state and local officials. And as you can imagine, we're located in Long Island and in Brooklyn, so we're dealing with the city of New York officials as well as the state of New York, rather complex fabric that we have to work with. As we proceeded into this, we recognize that the first priority for us is the learning, the actual experience of the student. And so with the assistance of our talented online faculty, we developed different approaches, and we set up these courses so that they were more than just an online course. In other words, there were components where the students would interact with one another during the week. We did everything we could to make the courses mimic as much as possible the learning experience in the classroom. So for example, with my course, the students had a discussion board that they had to use during the week, answer all kinds of questions about the readings and listening assignments, so that when we did meet, they had already had a full discussion. And I actually found this to be strangely useful. And I actually think my students learned more this semester because that forced them to communicate with one another about the course material in a more deep way. And I was really happy with the results. By the end of the semester, I think they came away with a great deal of knowledge. The only sad part was, of course, we couldn't have the interactions and performances in class that we normally would. My experience, I think, was very similar to the experience of many of the professors at the school. It was still a rewarding experience to teach the students, but as all of you probably know from doing your own work and going online and being virtual, this is actually kind of exhausting. It's difficult to communicate and to connect with people in this medium. So I think all of the professors have done a heroic job. I just taught one course. They're teaching 4 courses, many of them sometimes even more than 4 courses a semester. So you can imagine the complexity of shifting an entire history of education for them onto a new platform, onto a new approach, and setting up all of the necessary components on their websites. I do think the quality of learning was very high and continues to be, but I think it takes a toll on the students and faculty to work in this medium. So we're looking forward to getting back in the fall to virtually an approach which is similar to what we normally would do in the fall, but we will retain some of the advantageous aspects of remote learning in various programs and courses. The area of finance, of course, is a really important one. The college has a terrific advantage over many other schools on Long Island and in the city, and that is we do not have residence halls. We don't depend on residence halls or dining halls for auxiliary income, and that's not built into our budget. And so unlike a school like Hofstra or Delphi, LIU, we're not having to deal with the huge deficits that many of those schools are dealing with. That has had a terrific advantage for us that we've been able to continue to maintain our faculty and staff. I have not furloughed or terminated anyone related to COVID, very, very few cases, and only then in some kind of a discipline where there was really no reason to continue, and many of them were part-timers. But by and large, we have maintained a full staff and the full faculty that we normally would have. I did this partially because I thought it made sense financially, but I also did it because I experienced Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans when I was there. In the aftermath, many colleges, I think, panicked. They laid off a lot of people thinking that it was necessary to protect their finances. And then when it came time to reopen, they had a demoralized staff. They weren't prepared for the students. And in fact, it was a detriment. And so I saw no reason to take those kinds of radical steps. And again, I had the benefit of not having the huge deficits that some of my other presidential colleagues were suffering from. Going forward into the year, as Andrea reported, our enrollments look pretty good. It's very, very difficult to predict how the fall will shake out. Right now, the numbers look about like the numbers we had in 2019. I'm optimistic they may be slightly higher, but we're prepared either way to deal with the student numbers as best we can. I think that St. Joseph's is a school that has attracted a number of students, not only because of the programs, but also because of the safety of the campus, the reputation of the school, and the effectiveness of our programs. When we're matched up with other schools, for example, the Department of Education's scorecard system, St. Joseph's graduates are able to go out and get jobs at a very high rate and also at a very good salary. And so students and parents are very, very clever consumers. They understand that the value proposition of the school, even in a time like this, is actually very, very good. In fact, I think the pandemic will probably show, if it hasn't already shown, the value of a college education. Because when you look at the sectors that were the most impacted and the people who had the most difficult time, will discover pretty clearly that those with a college education fared much better. If you have a skill that can be done virtually, of course, then this is a great advantage. So I think parents and students are seeing that, and they're continuing to apply and continuing to take our courses, and we're excited about that. Moving forward, as I said, we're going to keep a close eye on these new modalities, remote learning, hybrid types of courses, because we can see that not only were they useful during the crisis, not only did we have them even before the crisis, but there is a transformation occurring in education, which I think is similar to some great transformations in history. And that is, there is a change now towards the more use of remote learning, more use of online vehicles for education. And the old days of just pure classroom teaching, I think, are over. The students have had a taste of what it's like to have the convenience of this type of education. And I think a mixture of both modalities is going to become more and more common. The other transformation that's occurred, in this case, not necessarily willingly, is that faculty across the country have now been forced to teach online. And many of them have discovered that it's actually not so bad, and that it can be effective. We have a number of cases here in our own campus of faculty who before were quite opposed to any form of online learning, who have now become advocates of it. So I think that the faculty and students together are going to be moving forward into a new landscape of education, which will definitely involve more of these remote modalities. The other revolution that I think is occurring is that because of that, professors and colleges and universities are rethinking their curriculum, and they're thinking about how they're presenting it. When you have to shift your course, if you, on a professor's level, to an online or remote modality, you have to review every aspect of that course and rethink the learning goals of the course and the approaches of the course. And although that initially is a bit of a shock for a professor, it forced all of us to rethink our courses and ask ourselves, is this really what we want to be teaching our students, or should I be focusing perhaps on something else? And so out of that crisis, I think, will come new approaches and new ways of thinking of courses in education, which I think will be really beneficial for the students. The other thing which I saw, and I know other professors saw, is that for the students, the shift to online was far more natural. They're already doing everything on their phone and online. And so it wasn't such a big leap for them as it was for those of us who were in our 60s. That shift to the remote modality was not as difficult for them. However, there is an aspect to it which is critical. And I saw this also when I was in New Orleans after Katrina. And that is, there's a tremendous psychological toll that is taken on people who have to live through a large crisis. What has happened and what will happen is we will definitely see more cases of depression, struggle with focus, dealing with everyday issues that come up, and of course, related to that, the financial after effects of the pandemic. So our school has a very, very well built out program of student life, student counseling, and student support. and we'll continue to build on that. At the same time, I proposed, and the faculty were willing to agree with me on this, I proposed that we needed a new program, a program of Masters of Social Work, which we'll be implementing in the fall of 2022. And this relates to 4 or 5 of the majors that we have that will feed into that. And that's a program that will prepare students to become mental health professionals and counselors. And I think there's going to be a tremendous need for these types of professionals on Long Island and in the city over the next 10 years as part of the after effects. This is exactly what happened in Louisiana after Katrina. The sad thing was that after Katrina, many of the health professionals left the state. And so the problem was even more severe. But I think our new program in social work will allow the students to find a wonderful career that will be transformational and also helpful to the people of Long Island. And so we're very, very excited about that. I think that all told, as I look at it, I think St. Joseph's has done well. We've been able to, remain financially viable. And as Andrea mentioned, we also continued on with our plans to construct a new student center here on the Long Island campus. This building will be a multi-purpose building that will include meeting spaces, an art gallery, a chapel, of course, dining areas for the students. It's something we've never had. So we're excited to build this. This is something that actually was proposed by one of my predecessors, Sister Elizabeth Hill, maybe 10 or 12 years ago as something to look at. And so I'm really happy that we're going to be able to construct it. Along with the construction of the building, of course, we had to put out bonds. So we put out a $17 million bond offering that went really well. And at the same time, we refinanced the college's debt so that our debt payments are actually lower now than they were before with the addition of the $17 million to construct the center. Along with the construction of the center, we are also doing an upgrade of our sewer systems on campus, and we'll be tying into the village sewage system. And so this is also a major ecological step for us. As you know, the issue of wastewater and wastewater management on Long Island is a critical issue. And so this is a step that I think is good for the college, and we're excited to be able to do that. And we'll also make, the entire area safer in Long Island. And I know that it's a major concern for the county commissioners and for the county executive. All of that told, I feel good about the state of the college and where we're headed. I do think that if you look across the country, there are many schools that are reassessing their futures. This has been a very, very hard year for many of them. We'll see how they do. I'm fortunate in that I'm a member of several organizations that allows me to talk to other college presidents pretty frequently. So I feel good about the future of education, but I do think that the pandemic has changed the way we think about education, and the schools that will do the best in the future are the schools that will have learned those lessons.
Doctor, I'd like to begin the question period, if you don't mind.
That's fine with me.
All right. And one of the things that you said that I wanted to flesh out a little bit was that the impact of remote learning, and that you created this discussion board that would kind of fill in for that interpersonal classroom experience. When I went to school, I was not a great student, but I was totally involved with the classroom. And I would very often be the leader of a discussion because I didn't understand things and I wanted it explained to me better. Well, it was a very good way of learning. And as a result, I did okay. But I'm wondering if a person like me would be at a disadvantage in the new scenario. And do you know that?
Yeah, I think, well, there were certainly some students that were more comfortable expressing themselves. But, Ernie, one of the interesting things was that I've had classes where I had 1 or 2 students that love to talk, love to connect, but I also had the back row of students that never opened their mouths. And that group, strangely enough, has been liberated. So now they're able to participate in discussions. In fact, they have to, because the technology is such that I not only can see what they say, I can even see how many hours they spend online with the course. That's really diabolical, but I can actually see how hard they're working. So students that in my classes before might have been totally silent found a voice online, which before they would have never had. And the discussions between the students, if I showed you any of them, I think you'd be impressed with them, because the students not only talked about a whole range of issues, but they did it with such respect and love for one another. It was great. So I think that the discussions, the remote discussions, is something I will keep even when I teach this course on ground again, because I think it allowed students who previously had not been able to really interact to interact.
That's an interesting take. I think it, you know, as we're forced into situations that we've never had to experience before, we learn things that we never knew that existed. So my hat goes off to you for that. And having a wife that teaches at the college or taught at the college level, I don't think she's got any courses planned right now. I know there's frustrations in that arena, and I'm wondering what your professors are telling you as far as this, you know, their individual experiences has been.
Well, I think that you know, it's the whole range, as you can expect. There are some that have extremely positive feelings. There's some that have less positive feelings, but in general, I think the satisfaction of the faculty with what we've done has been pretty high. And I think that many of them have come away with a respect for our technical staff, for example, that is quite incredible. So they recognize how excellent the staff has been to help them. But certainly, I don't think that remote education is ever going to replace the classroom experience. I think it augments the classroom experience. And that's kind of the perspective that I've tried to present to the faculty. And I think they're comfortable with that. So we're going to try to let those faculty who are especially excellent with this new modality continue in it on some level, but also definitely support those that prefer the on-ground approach.
Frankly, you got any
Yeah,
people?
Dr. Boomgarten, I have a question. We haven't gotten any yet in the chat, but I'm sure we will. I'm Frank Imburgio, by the way, at Desktop Solutions, and I'm the technical guy here for the virtual meetings. I'm wondering if certainly we all heard during the pandemic about a technological divide based on income. It was very easy for those of us, you know, with good incomes to assure that our kids had laptops and webcams, but that may not be true for all families. I'm wondering how you found this on Long Island, if there is such a divide, and how would we know if there was one and the students were unable to let us know?
Well, Frank, that's a great question. Actually, our typical student is a first-generation student. And so we have a lot of students that are challenged financially. In fact, I've experienced this in my own classroom frequently, that a student will come and say, you know, Dr. Boomgarten, I can't make class next week because I have a shift.
Yeah.
Right? So these kids are workers. And even the families in Long Island, maybe they're not a first generation, but they're certainly not from wealthy families. And this situation is even more pronounced in Brooklyn, where we have many first generation students. So we actually established a special fund, a COVID emergency fund for the students. We had a tremendous response from the community of gifts. So that allowed us to provide students with the technological assistance they needed. So for example, if they didn't have a device, then we were able to supply them with a device. If they didn't have connectivity, then we found ways to get them connectivity. And so we did, we loaned out any number of machines, iPads, and various types of things to the students to help them. Now, the students fortunately didn't really have the problem of how to use the technology. They just didn't have the machines. So we were able to do that. So yeah, we're proud of our efforts in that regard.
I have two sons in college right now, one in undergrad in Brooklyn and one a grad student in Texas. And they both tell me that they Google Docs or the Google Office suite has become the way that they share everything. Is that the true on your campus as well?
Well, we certainly use Google Docs. We also have a learning management system, which is called Canvas, that's highly effective. So we use various approaches there, but certainly as you know, your students are showing, you know, the students are very adept at using these technologies.
Yeah, in fact, we've created a shared Google Docs now among the family to keep track of all our streaming passwords.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is something that we would not have done a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many things that have happened that we would have never seen before. I mean, my favorite was I had a student, you know, one of the problems for us is, you know, when you start a class, you want to see your students. So I would always say, look, students, just, sign on your video screen so I can at least see you while I begin the class. And so I was having students, you know, and they would turn on their video and they'd be in the subway. They'd be on a bus. They'd be, you know, in their little sister's room, and they'd be in a closet, you know, so it was quite fascinating. And I think I can share with the group even a funnier story of one of my biology professors told me that in the middle of one of their courses, one of the students didn't realize that her video was on. It was a young nursing student, and she decided to change clothes. So there are lots of things that have happened that are rather unusual.
Kathy, your school has a reputation for being affordable and being innovative in getting money to the students for their education. There's talk about having free education for college because going back in history, what we did was we created grade school and high school at no cost to the parents. But we were in a very primitive time compared to where we are now. Does it make sense for you for students to have their college education paid just like we do for grammar school and for high school?
Well, I think that I'd have to say that there's certainly merit in the idea of free education. So don't get me wrong as I talk about this, but I think the pandemic has shown you some of the limitations of free education. And that is that it's been the private schools that have been more responsive to the needs of the students and parents than some of the free state institutions. And actually, if you look at education, you know, free education has been available for a long time for elementary, junior high, high school students across the country. And yet private education has continued to thrive even on those levels. So I think there's always going to be a place for both. I think that they both have a lot of merit, but I spend a lot of time in discussions with state officials about this issue because, you know, the idea of free education sounds great until you have to figure out who's going to pay for it and how expensive it is and how difficult it is to have quality education. Education is not cheap. People who work in education have to be paid and they need to be paid well if you want to keep them. The resources that are required for education now are very different than they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you could walk in a room and there'd be a chalkboard and a desk. And now there's a whole array of technological equipment that's required. So the expense of education has risen. So I think that the discussions of free education are well-intentioned, but they need to be grounded a little bit more in the reality of economics. And also, I'm not totally convinced that it's good for young people not to understand that there is a kind of issue of payment, of commitment in education. And so, although we try very hard, I think, you know, we're regularly the lowest cost private institution on Long Island and in New York City. And we also have a very high discount rate. So the average student on either campus is paying prices for education that are comparable to CUNY or SUNY schools. I think that idea of free education is one that has merit, but I'd be very cautious about it because I do think that there is an element of education which is so expensive that eventually that is going to catch up with the state governments.
Wouldn't that be implemented by giving you a subsidy for every student instead of changing the way you charge for education, so that an education bill that came in at 30,000 might come in at 15,000.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that would be advantageous to the college.
Well, that's exactly what I said to Senator Schumer when I went to Washington. I said, I love the Excelsior program, Senator, but could you talk to the governor about this? Because it seems to only be applied to state schools. And so why can't a similar kind of grant be in place for students that choose to go to private schools? I think the private schools, the private universities of the state are a huge generator of financial improvement and a tremendous source of tremendous resource for the state of New York. And so to create an Excelsior program that only focuses on the state schools is in my opinion, a huge mistake. And it's the same, that opinion is shared by all the presidents of the CICU. So you're absolutely right, Ernie, that if such an arrangement was created, I'd be all for that.
Yeah.
Ernie,
Well, it makes sense.
it's before my time to know this, but you probably will. The GI Bill, that wasn't literally free, the sky's the limit for education. How did that work? I'm sure. Was that a certain amount?
Yeah, that was a certain amount. And of course, our veterans are still getting benefits. And we have a very large population of veteran students on our campus. And so, yeah, that system worked quite well. And that could be used in a private or a state institution. So I think that's a much better model than the Excelsior program.
And certainly the whole nation, I think, agrees that that was responsible for an economic turnaround that made America first in the world.
Exactly.
Economically.
Yeah, exactly.
Ernie, we have a number of questions here from the chat. And so, and the first is from Marguerite. So we don't want to leave her out or you'll be paying the price later on. So Marguerite was asking, courses that have labs, is there an opportunity to have blended courses, some weeks on campus, other weeks remotely? How is that idea going to be handled at St. Joe's?
Well, we actually have a lot of lab courses because we have a very large and lively program in the sciences. We have a nationally ranked nursing program on both campuses. We also have a fine department in chemistry and biology. There are many physicians on Long Island and in the city that graduated from St. Joseph's College. So right away, our science faculty said, listen, we have to have these kids in labs. We can't do this at home. And so we created classrooms for the labs with special partitions and all kinds of safety measures that the biologists approved. So we've continued to teach many of the labs on ground. And so we haven't shifted those important classes into remote modalities. So I think that, to answer the question, we've already kind of done that. If for some reason we have to continue it, then we're more than prepared to do it. But we saw right away that in certain types of courses, those laboratory experiences were actually critical.
By the way, Marguerite is a professor and she's also my wife.
Right. So the next question is sort of the same question, but the flip side. Do you anticipate any online only classes in the future? Some classes will they remain online?
Yes. Well, as I said at the beginning, we already have 27 fully online programs. So those will continue. So they are undergraduate and graduate level certificate programs, all types of programs that are completely online. And we actually have, if you look at our website, you'll see we have 3 campuses. We have Long Island, we have Brooklyn, and we have online. And so it's actually, we have a whole campus devoted to online learning. But I think the question might be, are we going to shift any of the courses that were previously on ground into purely online? And in some cases, I think we may. It's going to be a discussion between the departments and the dean and the professors, which courses might seem to be a good fit for this. We also have a pretty robust system of hybrid education. The hybrid classroom for us means where we have students in Brooklyn and Long Island taking a course simultaneously. We have, I think, half a dozen or more hybrid classrooms, which allow a professor to teach from one campus or the other with students from both campuses. We had that before the pandemic. And so we'll continue with those kinds of approaches in the future. The interesting thing about St. Joseph's is because we have 2 large campuses, we've been forced to use technology in a way that a school that just had one campus would not have.
Yeah.
So to make the most of our resources, both faculty and staff, we've been using technology for maybe 10 or 15 years in a way that I think is pretty sophisticated. In fact, we got a special shout out from the Chronicle of Higher Education for the entire way that we have managed the technological revolution during the pandemic.
So we have some questions from Julie Lutz, who's from Eastern Suffolk, BOCES. Having lived and led through Katrina, she's wondering what expectations you may have for deficits in the incoming class of 2021, and how do you expect to support them, and what can you do to help them achieve success academically as well as socially?
That's a good question, Julie. I think so. When you talk about deficits, you're talking about the students not having had the quality of education that they normally would have gotten, I think, due to the pandemic, because of not being able to go to class or having to do courses remotely. I think that's going to be not just for this class that's coming in now, but it's going to be for several years, right? This pandemic will probably affect student learning for the next 10 years, if not longer, because each student who comes in will have had this very, very strange year that has not allowed them to learn quite the same way that they did when they were younger. If I could draw from my personal experiences, when I was a little boy, my father was in the Navy, and we were stationed on an island in Alaska called Kodiak Island. And while we were there, they had the largest earthquake and tidal wave in the history of the United States, the 1964 earthquake. And most of the Naval Air Station where I lived was destroyed. We had no power for 2 months. And it happened around the same time the pandemic started. It happened also in kind of April or March. So I also missed out as a child on almost half a year of education. And I have to be honest with all of you and say I probably learned more at home. I developed all kinds of strange and unusual habits and skills that continued with me through the rest of my life. In fact, I found that I read a great deal more. Of course, for us on the island, we also didn't have power, so there was no radio or TV or anything like that. So I also really improved my piano skills during that period. So there's something to be said for living through a crisis. So I think on the one hand, I think that the students will come in with some deficits, but they may also come in with an attitude, a resilience that has been created by living through such a difficult time. So I think it could be a glass half full opportunity for education, but certainly we are expecting that students will need special help.
Doctor, you did well possibly because of the education of your parents. Is that could have been a big factor too, right?
Well, my parents were both not college graduates, but they stressed education. And my father, even when I was a boy in Alaska, I would come home from school and he'd say, "What did you learn today?" And I would say, "I learned this." And he'd say, "Well, that's not enough." And so we're going to sit down with one another. And so as I've told people before, my father's textbook for me was a book called On a Destroyer's Bridge. And I became an expert at geometry. And if I was ever asked to dock a destroyer, I think I could do it. So that was his idea of education.
I think we had a question from Mohinder. Mohinder, did you have a question?
I know Mohinder had unmuted himself, but due to background noise, I muted him again. Mohinder, did you have a question?
Okay. Guess not.
Okay. So we had a question from Ron Golmi about student engagement with online distance learning. How might that be improved? I think it's similar to what you've been discussing, but I'm just going to elaborate a little with, I guess, an interesting example. My son is going for film, and he's the head of the film club at college. And so the first 2 years, they just showed films in the student union, and they didn't get such great show attendance. So this year during COVID, Instead, he decided to show shorts that the film students had made themselves, partly because, it just didn't make sense to do a 2-hour Zoom meeting. And the attendance and the feedback went up dramatically. So it shifted from a passive event to a participatory event, thanks to the online component. And I think that's the core of what has to be understood. I've also been a virtual worker now for over 10 years. So there's an interactivity that really can be an advantage when you reshape things to take advantage of that interactivity.
Yeah.
So, but back to the question, how do students learn to do this in their own lives?
Well, just as your son, the idea of doing a project on their own and having to present it, and having, I suppose, having the freedom to develop something like that using technology, which is something that they're familiar with. And, Frank, and Julie, I'd say and Ron, that I'd say that movement from passive to active learning is critical. And so trying to get students to be actively involved in things and engaged in things is one of our primary duties. And that can be very difficult. And so it is a kind of interesting that in some cases we've been able to better get them active through the use of technology than we did in the classroom. As I said, with my students, many students became much more active in discussions online than they ever did when they were in the classroom. But I do think that that is a dilemma in education at all times, is how do you get students to actually use their skills to create something and move out of that passive zone. And for me, as president, one of the reasons I love St. Joseph's is that this is a very active education school. In other words, it's very hands-on. Our faculty are trained professionals. Faculty like Alan, who's sitting in with us today, is a trained management professional who's been out in the field for years. So when he's teaching his students, he is bringing this incredible expertise and knowledge of practical things. And I can say that about every single department I have, where we have faculty who are actively engaged in their careers teaching. And I think that they model that active behavior for the students.
We have a question from Edward Lee, and he's unmuted. He'll ask his question himself.
Great, thank you. Again, my name's Ed Lee. I'm actually a partner in KPMG's higher education practice, but my question actually comes from as a parent of a college student. And one of the great benefits of attending college is the friendships and the networks that you create, or as my wife calls it, building your social capital. For those students who are in their maybe third or fourth years of the university, what advice do you give them, or what programs do you have to help these remote students, leave there with that network and those friendships that we all had, when we had live instruction?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I think that's one of the reasons why I've worked really hard with my student life staff to make sure that they create a whole range of activities for the students outside of the classroom. So for an example, right now we're doing a special focus on St. Joseph because it's the year of St. Joseph. Pope Francis kind of rededicated the year to St. Joseph. And so I asked my mission and ministry directors on both campuses to create some kind of an activity for the students involving St. Joseph. So they created basically a discussion board / weekly Zoom session where they have readings about St. Joseph and they talk about their faith. They talk about their faith journeys in a kind of opportunity for them to share. And this is completely outside of the realm of a class, but it gives them a chance to connect with one another in a meaningful way. And of course, all of that is, we have contributing to that some of the sisters and some of the other theology and religion faculty that we have to help them with it. But I think that those opportunities for friendship and for linkage are really critical. Young people, what is one of the great crises today for all society, but especially for young people, is the crisis of alienation, of feeling not connected. And so this crisis has really doubled that sense of being not connected. we've started having more and more students on campus, and it cracks me up because I can hardly hear myself in my office on some days because the students outside are having such a great time seeing one another again. And they're not talking about anything in particular, but I can tell there's just this incredible joy of seeing another human being and being able to interact with them. So I think that that's one of the real challenges. I think St. Joseph's has done a good job with that. We've continued all of our clubs. We've continued our athletic program on a limited basis so that the students can connect with one another. So I feel good about that, but it is definitely one of the real serious challenges of the last year.
I think we have time for one more question, and Ron Gulmy is a professor at Farmingdale, and he is unmuted and would like to ask us a question.
Hi, Dr. Boomgarten. Thanks
Hi.
so much for your time this morning. We are a SUNY and we use Blackboard Learn. I'm not sure what your platform is. And we use Collaborate Ultra, as well as we have Zoom accounts. But so on student engagement, there's a policy that, we cannot ask students to turn their cameras on. In a private college, do you have those kind of policies? Is that a state law, or what's happening there?
Yeah, we use Canvas, by the way. I've used Blackboard, which is also a really good platform.
Right.
I think we have the same policy that we cannot force the students to be seen, but I ask them.
Right.
So if I had a student that said, Dr. Boomgarten, I just can't do it, I'd be fine, but
Right.
I do
Yeah,
ask.
certainly.
And our reason is basically we've got a lot of students that are living in environments that
Right.
they may not want to share, to be honest with you.
Right.
It was really funny. And by the way, Ron, your President Nader, he's like,
Right.
I love him. He's fantastic. When we were discussing commencement, you'll see if you drive around Long Island, you'll see, because there was no commencement, they're trying to do something. So they have signs in front of the house, my graduate Bob is, and so we asked the students, we'd like to create some signs for you to do that. And the student government came back to me and they said, Dr. Boomgarten, we think it's a great thing, but we have a lot of students that don't have homes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we don't want to make them feel bad by saying, here's a sign. So it's touching, when you think about this.
Yeah.
But I do think that as a professor, it was very difficult for me to teach when I only had one or two students that I could see. And I'm sure you had that experience.
I have none. I have
Oh.
never once had a student show themselves.
Uh-huh.
They have to provide term project presentations. They have to provide group presentations. They just don't want to show themselves.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really bizarre. I understand that sometimes they're in settings and they're with families and they're in a small bedroom or they're in a living room or whatever.
Yeah.
Certainly get that.
Yeah.
But, they are all multitasking.
Mhm.
They're all distracted.
Mhm.
I think they just sign into the class and have their name show up. I'll just give you a quick example. Last spring, I had an afternoon off. It was a gorgeous sunny day. I went to Bethpage to play golf by myself. I got joined up with 3 young men in their early 20s. And the fella in my cart that I was riding with was like on his smartphone the whole time. And I'm like, you seem really distracted. He goes, oh, well, I'm in class. The professor just called on me. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that there are many stories like that. I was lucky. My students were pretty darn devoted. And the students I had that seemed to be that way dropped out of the course pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I do think that if, Ron, if we were going to continue this for the next 5 years, we'd have to address that issue. It's like, that's just not a healthy thing. And I think we'd have to get to the point where we'd say, this whole thing of not signing in, of not being able to see the student, we're going to have to address that. Fortunately, I think we're through that stage.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Frank, we're going to have to consider wrapping up here.
Perfect timing, yes.
And I want to thank Dr. Boomgarten for coming in. And I think it was a good, lively discussion. And I thank you very much. And I thank St. Joseph's college for supporting us on this. The next meeting is going to be a very important meeting on maglev, the power of maglev. It's James Jordan is the president of the maglev 2000 company. And he's a very knowledgeable guy. He knows the science as well as anybody. And he co-authored a book with me and the scientists a number of years ago on this topic. So I think it'll be an extremely interesting meeting, and I hope you all can attend. Any closing remarks, Frank?
Well, actually, yes. I'd like to just get this in. Ken White from Brookhaven National Labs is chiming in that they developed a code of conduct for video conferencing, including proper backgrounds, dress, diversity, and inclusion, and that was the way that they addressed this last topic that we were just discussing.
That's great.
Yes, and finally, I want to let our attendees know that Limba is asking your support. On our website, we have a donate button. We lost our funding source of being able to hold meeting breakfasts. And as we all can see, we're doing it virtually, but we no longer have the funding source. And if you would like to, please donate whatever you can, or even better, a small monthly donation that we can count on at our website, limba.net. We would appreciate it, and it would go a long way to helping us keep this valuable venue alive. So that's it. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Doctor. We're closing out.